Hello, I'm Dorothy Villain, and I have the honor and the privilege of bringing a brand new program to Tucson and the surrounding area for military wives and families. I am a 44-year military veteran spouse, and I just really wanted to bring what's on my heart here. I went to see just a couple of days ago with some friends of mine, American Sniper. And I know that it has just tremendous box office openings and people are interested in the message of this movie. But I watched it from a whole different perspective than I think a lot of people do who go to the movie to be entertained. They probably didn't expect to be entertained by this movie, but they probably didn't listen to it on the level that it really struck me as a military spouse. I went with two friends, and one of them is active duty military Army Ranger, who has done very similar work with two deployments within two deployments?
He did three.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
He did three deployments within 6 years. And he did similar work to what you see in the movie. And I also have Marie Gacky here, and Marie is my executive assistant. She's a very good friend. But more importantly, she has been an Air Force flight nurse and active duty air person. And she went through war experiences. She did two deployments in the war zone within 2 years. So she also has very fresh firsthand experiences that she watched the lens. That's what she watched this movie through. And it had different meanings for each one of us, but very similar meanings in a lot of ways. And as I watched it from the perspective of a military spouse, they watched it from the perspective of actually being a soldier and an airman and going through the war zone and going through it firsthand. And what really grabbed me in this movie was how the wife in the story and Chris Kyle, the soldier, were trying to build a bridge of understanding from where he was and what he had gone through and why he continued to redeploy, and where she was, as the wife, trying to wear all the hats and raise a family, and he just wasn't there. And even when he was there, he wasn't there. And some of the things she said were so poignant to me because it's exactly what I've lived through. And even though I've learned a lot along the way, and that's a lot of what this program will be about, is to reach out to military families and try to share through my own experience and a tiny bit of wisdom that I've gained along the way, to share with you insights that just might help you be a little bit more understanding of where he possibly is coming from. And you deal with it on a daily basis, and it's not easy. It's not easy, but it's so important that we try to understand. One of my favorite sayings is, seek first to understand, and then be understood. And so this movie really brings that home. And Marie, I've asked her if she would just join us briefly here and talk about wearing each one of these hats. First, as an active duty officer in the Air Force and flight nurse. And secondly, she's also now the wife of an Army Ranger, very much like a younger version of my husband. My husband did 5 deployments, and he won't even go see a war movie. So that's why I was going with Korean Trey. He won't even go see it. He just can't go there. So it's really heart-wrenching stuff for me. And I know a lot of you are going through that right now today, and many of you have gone through it more than once, redeploying. And so we want to talk about some of those issues. And Marie, first of all, talk to us about when you were active duty and what you got from this movie from that perspective of having been there firsthand.
Sure, absolutely. So I will say that in the time that I spent in the Air Force, I was a flight nurse, which means we went into combat and we picked up soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines who had been injured in some form or fashion. And my job was to make sure they got back to a safer point as quickly as possible. And it wasn't just me, it was my team. There's 5 to 7 other people that joined us, or 4 to 6 other people who joined us. And we had the opportunity to serve each and every one of them to make sure they were as safe as possible either getting back to a larger facility or getting back to the United States. So for me, having had those back-to-back deployments, it was stressful because and I know I'm not the only one, whether you be a finance person or a personnelist or, you know, a front runner, a Green Beret or whomever, training and deploying, eventually your body gets tired and wants some rest, but you can't. The mission has to go on. And so from that, I understood the call to continue to fight in my capacity. I wasn't wielding a weapon in the same capacity as some of my brethren, but I did have the opportunity to understand that it didn't matter how tired I was or how exhausted I was or the impact that it was taking on me and my team. We had to get stuff done and we had to take care of our folks, and we made it happen. So as a professional, you know, that was one thing, but as a nurse, it was a different perspective because I saw the mental health breakdowns as they were happening. So on our flights, we really were in a position to see how they were responding, if they were still making jokes, if they were just quiet. And sometimes we could tell, and sometimes people were overcompensating, and we wondered about those too. So, you know, the military does its best. There's a lot of people, and could they do more? Absolutely. There's a lot of areas for improvement, and there's a lot of programs out there that are trying to fill that need. But the fact is that our job was to observe and report as we could. And when we couldn't tell, we knew that most folks aren't going to self-identify them as mentally needing health in that area. But
well, there's a lot of there's not good outcomes often when they do identify need, right?
They can't deploy anymore, and they can't be out there where their friends are at and where their brothers are at and where they're the closest people. My husband says all the time, they're the closest people besides his own blood. And you know, it's something that I've learned to appreciate, that I'm not going to fully understand as a wife, but can kind of comprehend because I saw it as a nurse. Whether it be a military working dog or it be, you know, somebody that you've worked with for the last 4 or 5 months, those are your family. So you want to get back there and you want to take care of them, and you definitely don't want to identify yourself as somebody who can't deploy any longer. So my two lessons, you said to come up with something practical that people could come home with.
Yeah, it might help them. So it's all about you guys.
And it's a tough topic. So as a professional, either as an officer or as a nurse, the two things that I want to take away are the brotherhood is something that unless you're there, you're not going to get it. And I say brotherhood, fraternal order, sisterhood, however you want to call it. Unless you're there, you're not going to really understand. You can try, and I can guarantee you there are those who have tried to explain it, but basically it's a whole different family with a whole different sense of humor and a whole different set of standards that you operate by in that environment. The second thing is that there's a light switch that comes with that kind of perspective. You go all the time, and it's the biggest adrenaline rush that some of these folks have ever known. And when they come home, if it's their first time, sometimes they have a little trouble getting the exact on and then off switch. And so it kind of gets fuzzy in the middle where the light flickers. You know what I'm talking about?
I know what you're talking about.
For me, it was a lot easier because I'd been a nurse before and I'd seen a lot of things before. But some people don't have that capacity and they haven't seen those things before. And it is a really hard thing for them to go, okay, this is work time, this is deployment time, this is different from home time and playing with kids time. Whatever that case may be, once you deploy, that switch does flip, and it may not look, my switch may not flip the same way that somebody else's switch may flip. You may come home and cry every day for a month. One of my friends was angry and just bitter at everybody for a long time, and I've seen a lot of things happen as a result of the different kinds. I didn't sleep for months. Not well anyway, and you know, there's just different things that people go through that you can't predict. So you do the best you can, and as the deployments continue, you get better at understanding how to switch that switch on and off. hopefully you've figured out how to come all the way back and you're not just on a dimmer anymore. So.
Well, I thought the movie did a really good job of depicting how difficult it is to come back.
It was.
It was, especially for someone, like Chris Kyle or like some of your special forces, but really anyone who feels like that mission is their purpose. And they take that to the core of their being. I know my husband did. And it's been a real struggle between us to build a bridge. And there's still pieces of that bridge missing after 44 years. So that's saying a lot. And and that's to people who have really made an effort to try and build a bridge. So, it's such an important topic, particularly for our military families.
My husband took it very seriously. There's no greater love than a man who's willing to lay his life down for his friends. And so, there's nothing more intense than to be in that situation and be tested on that every day. Or in some days and not other days. So being his wife was kind of tricky, that's for sure. I thought I'm an Air Force officer. I've done this. I've deployed. I know what I'm doing. No.
It's different with the other hat on, isn't it?
It was different.
Yeah. Can you speak to that for us?
Absolutely. I will. It's not airing dirty laundry. It's educating in hopes that somebody else won't go through some of the hard stuff that, took us so long to get words for. As a wife, there's all those jobs that you have to be responsible for. You have the bills, you have the kids, if that applies in your situation. Sometimes it's a job, sometimes, you're in the middle of moving, you're going to go stay with your parents, or sometimes, it's 2 weeks after he's gone and like clockwork, the washing machine breaks, the car has got problems, the electrical bill didn't go through this month, whatever.
Yeah, and it always happens.
You're trying to solve these problems and they're gone. And you're going, I have a power of attorney. I did it all right. Why won't you help me? And holding all those hats and trying to do it all at once. You get to a point where when you get back together, instead of, rejoining and you're so excited and everything's going to be just like it was and it's going to be fantastic. One of the things that I've learned that we did wrong was we expected some of those things to be kind of the same. And they kind of were, but the people weren't. We really, and we've talked about this at length, we really had to relearn how to be people again together. And the jobs were still there, the bills were still there, the problems were still there, but how we handled them had changed. Where before we could just, hey, you got that? All of a sudden it was, why do you assume that I've got this handled? And I wish I was joking, but I know you've been there too. So that was one of the hardest, I think, to understand and put words to, is that it's
Jasper once in.
He's the bulldog. It's just one of those things where you get down to the end of the day and you go, oh, okay, we're totally different people now.
Yeah. And I think that is it. It's hard to articulate it, but you're changed by the experience. And what's so important to understand is not only is he changed by the experience, or you were changed by the experience of being active duty and in a war zone, but the spouse who's back here holding the fort.
As Mrs. Gacky, I changed just being the wife.
Absolutely.
I learned so much about,
person
my mom was a military wife as well, and she can't prepare somebody for that. You can say all the nice things, but the best thing that she taught me was, keep going. Do not bring up your issues unless he asks. Because whatever he's doing right now, he needs to be focused almost 99.9% of the time on that. And so I think that was the best bit of advice she could have given me, to allow me to know, okay, if he asks, I can tell him, because some husbands have more time, some spouses have more time, depending on where they're located and what's going on. And, I'd hear from mine maybe once a week when he was in Afghanistan. And at that time, that was not the time to tell him the electrical bill didn't go through for whatever reason. The direct deposit didn't happen, and it's supposed to happen, and I don't know why, but we can't fix it. And she said, keep it to yourself. If he asks, you can tell him. If he asks what's going on, make sure you say, this is what's wrong. This is what I've done. This is how I'm going to fix it. or don't say anything at all, because he needs to stay focused.
Mm-hmm.
And then it helped because he got home and, we'd handled most of the issues independently, and there were a couple together. So I did have to ask for help a couple of times, but it was different. It was different. We were both changed by that event.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, and you become so much more of an independent individual during that time out of necessity.
You have to wear all those hats.
Absolutely. So here you are, you've become much more independent, and here comes this other person back into your life expecting
the old balance.
Yeah, the old balance.
Yeah,
it's like, and these sparks fly. I mean, it's just difficult to do. It's difficult for the children if there are children involved, and it's difficult for the spouse, the two spouses, to reconnect and understand on a different level, because that's basically what it takes in the end, is to just understand, to go to a different level.
Right. Exactly.
So
the only other thing that I had as a wife that I really had a lot of trouble with is, and it touched me in the movie. I came home and I was just real quiet for a long time. He would sit there in the nothingness, and I don't know what he was doing. He said everything was fine. He swore he was okay, but I could look at him and I could tell that he was not in fact okay. I could tell that he was having issues, and I could tell that this was affecting him to whatever degree. I mean, I'm not in his head, I don't know, but those kind of weird adjustments, I would hope that in my experience, both as a nurse and as a wife, I could just encourage the spouses that are out there that, like she said, seek first to understand and then be understood. If he's not in a position where he can say, here's what's on my mind, he's not in a position where he can understand where you're coming from either. Mm-hmm. He thinks he can, and he tries to, but sometimes, I've seen a lot of wives get noisy. I've seen a lot of girlfriends get noisy. Pay attention to me, just love me. He's working through it. And if he can, he will figure out that light switch, and he will learn how to come back. But it takes that patience to handle that nothingness, to relearn how to be a good husband again, and to be the guy that is the better version of himself, because he's never going to be the man you originally married or got with or dating, whatever. He's not going to be that guy anymore. He can't. You can't either. Don't expect it. Don't try. Just understand that you're doing the best you can, and if you need help, sometimes you need help, and there are options that aren't documented. So be sure and ask Dr. Dorothy what's going on with that, because she's got all the connections.
Yeah. And one of the things we've talked about too is that it's often the outcome to going and saying I need help professionally, it really puts some stoppers on things. So that's another thing the military is really trying to figure out is they know that people need help, and yet it's not good protocol, and there are some real negatives that go along with that. But if you do need help, and a lot of times when you're wanting him to tell you what's wrong, he can't tell you because he hasn't figured it out for himself. He's wounded.
He is, and it's so frustrating because you want to help.
Yeah, that's right. And he wants help, but he doesn't know how to express that. He doesn't even understand what's going on himself. And so that's one of our main points, I think, and takeaways from that movie. They did a great job. It's very well done of really portraying what it's really like, the struggle on both ends and in the middle that people go through. And so we'll be talking about that some, and we just wanted to share with you, what a moving experience, a deeply touching experience it was for all three of us. Her husband, who's still active duty, was even talked about it a little bit, which blew us away, because I was asking him some questions. Did you guys kick in doors and things like that? And that was the kind of job they did there. And so it had to be really hard for him to watch, and because it was so realistic. So we recommend that you see the movie, and if you have questions, reach out and reach out to me, DorothyVonVillen.com. It will be on your TV screen, and I'd love to be in contact with you and support you and answer questions any way that I can. And if you need a younger version of me, Maria and I worked very closely together, and she would also be glad to hear from you as well, and we will help however we can, because military families deserve respect, and they deserve support, and that's what we're here for. That's our mission now.
Well, thank you for having me, Dorothy. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it, Marie.
All right.
Marie Gackey. Thank you.